I now invite the President and Vice-Chancellor, Professor Margaret Gardner, to present a candidate for the degree of Doctor of Laws honoris causa.
Chancellor, Mr. Dion Weisler is an international business and technology leader and serves as President and Chief Executive Officer of HP Inc., a Fortune 100 company with more than $52 billion in revenue, 55,000 employees, and operations in more than 170 countries. Mr. Weisler is a Monash alumnus with a Bachelor of Applied Science in Computing. He's worked in Australia, Asia, Europe, and the United States, holding a number of key executive positions in the IT and telecommunications sectors. After holding senior management positions at Telstra, Mr. Weisler ran Ace's business in Central and Eastern Europe and then joined Lenovo, first running their South Pacific business before becoming Chief Operating Officer of Lenovo's product and mobile internet digital home groups. Mr. Weisler joined HP, Hewlett-Packard, in 2012 as Senior Vice President and Managing Director, Printing and Personal Systems for Asia Pacific and Japan, where he was responsible for all aspects of business in the region. He subsequently became Executive Vice President for the Printing and Personal Systems business, where he helped orchestrate and lead the company through one of the largest and most complex separations in business history. As a result, in 2015, he became President and CEO of HP Inc. Under his leadership, HP is on a very substantial reinvention journey. The company is unleashing innovation and investing in research and development in a combination of design and engineering to create the next generation of computing and printing, while accelerating the next industrial revolution with industrial full production 3D printing. And it really is a spectacular vision and journey. Mr. Weisler was named among Business Insider Australia's 50 most powerful people in enterprise tech. He serves on the board of Thermo Fisher and on the Monash Industry Council of Advisors. In addition to his business contributions, both HP and Mr. Weisler are recognised for their commitment to diversity and social impact programs. As a very passionate pilot, Dion flies for Angel Flight, a charity which coordinates flights to assist people with access to medical treatment that would otherwise be unavailable to them due to distance and travel costs. Chancellor, it gives me the very greatest pleasure to present to you for admission to the degree of Doctor of Laws honoris causa, Dion Weisler.
With the authority of Council, I admit you, Dion Weisler, to the degree of Doctor of Laws honoris causa. So it now gives me a great deal of pleasure in inviting a fabulous Australian back to Australia, back to Monash, Dr. Dion Weisler, to deliver the graduation address. Thank you.
Thank you so much for the very warm introduction. I want to tell you a story about my grandfather, a story about my grandmother, And then I want to tell you what those stories mean to me and what I think they mean to you in your lives and in your careers. First story. The year was 1938. The place, Vienna, Austria. Germans were rounding up Jewish men. My grandfather, my grandmother, and my father, who was 5 or 6 months old at the time, were walking down the street. Hitler's SS police force grabbed my grandfather and put him on a truck, headed to a work camp. As they were heading towards the camp, the truck stopped at a traffic light, and a group of SS officers in a neighbouring building yelled out, "Bring that Jew up here. We want to have some fun with him," meaning certain death. The drivers resisted, saying they had strict orders to bring the Jews to the labour camp, and they continued on their way. As the truck continued through town, my grandfather saw trucks coming in the other direction with men who were being brought back from the camp. They were gaunt, abused, nearly dead. He knew that if he went to the labour camp, he may not return. So he made a decision. When the truck slowed, he jumped off and he ran. They chased him, but he escaped through the woods and returned home. Now, this wasn't the first time that he was picked up, and he understood that things at home in Austria were only going to get worse. He decided he had to get his family and friends out. In Austria, it was illegal to sell tickets to Jews who wanted to leave the country, but ironically, it was still possible to buy those same tickets in Germany. He had heard of a Thomas Cook travel agent in Hamburg that sold tickets for a boat from Trieste, Italy to Shanghai, China, which was one of the only places that didn't require an entry visa. He gathered up all of his and my grandmother's money and travelled into the belly of the beast to Hamburg and to the Thomas Cook store. Now, keep in mind, as he trekked across Austria and Czechoslovakia and Germany by himself, he stood out with a bright yellow Star of David circling his arm. The wearing of this emblem was a legal requirement and a constant invitation for danger, torment, and death. But he had to take that risk. When he arrived in Hamburg, he scoped out the store. Then he went inside and he asked for as many tickets as he could afford. He had no idea what would happen, but they took his money and they told him to come back the next day. So where to go for the night? All of the stores, restaurants, and hotels displayed signs that said, "Juden sind hier unerwünscht." Jews are not welcome here. He finally came to the Salvation Army. Their storefront had that same sign, but he went in and asked if he could stay there. If not, he'd be homeless for the night. The staff told him, "By law, we must put up that sign, but of course you're welcome to stay here." I learned this part of the story just recently from my dad, which explains why he's always been so eager to donate to the Salvation Army. The next morning, my grandfather woke up early and staked out the store for hours. He told me how nervous he was, as he couldn't tell if the SS was waiting for him inside or not. But ultimately, he took the risk and he went in. The shop owner said that he had good news and bad news. They could only supply 32 of the 34 tickets that he requested. He got the tickets and returned home to Vienna, distributing them to family and friends, who could pack one bag each, and together they set out on a journey from Vienna through Slovenia to Trieste, and then on to the 75-day-plus boat ride to Shanghai. In one of the uncanny coincidences of life, I later lived in Vienna, I lived in Hamburg, I lived in China. Unconsciously, I was following my grandparents' footsteps. Second story. We called my grandmother Omi, and Omi's formative years were spent growing up in a privileged family that owned a major drink factory in Vienna. Their star product was an apple cider-like drink called Vienna Gold. Unbeknownst to me, it had also gone by another name, an Orbige Spritzt. When she was in her 80s, she visited my wife and me in Vienna, taking us on a magical journey of the city, reminiscing about her childhood and describing important landmarks and events in her early life, from her first home and the banister where she chipped her tooth as a kid, to where she shared her first hug with my grandfather Opa, and where Hitler first walked through the streets. That night, we went out for dinner, and I ordered an Orbige Spritzt, which in modern-day Vienna is an apple juice mixed with soda water. She gave me a look I will never forget, and she said, "Dion, how do you know that name? How does the waiter know that name?" The legacy of her family business had endured the devastation of Hitler's Germany and made its way into the modern Viennese vernacular. And the reason I tell it is because, to me, it's something of an analogy for her life. In her mid-20s, she was thrust into late 1930s China with no money, no job, no support, no language. After stepping off the boat from Trieste, she, my grandfather, and my father lived in a small 1.8-metre squared room, which served as their kitchen, living room, bedroom, laundry room, and every other room. How do you make that adjustment she had to make from that privileged, sophisticated life in Vienna that she enjoyed in her teenage years to the harsh environment of 1930s China? I can only imagine the fear and trepidation she endured as a young woman with a young baby seeking refuge in the Shanghai ghetto. This radical change is incomprehensible to me. How does this not break you? How does this not destroy your soul and make you bitter? But despite all the hardship my grandmother endured in those 9 years in Shanghai, her home and her heart were always open. There was always room for friends and family. There was always food on the table for everyone. She opened a restaurant in Shanghai called Piccolo. She rose above all the challenges that came her way to build a future for her family. Growing up, I drew a number of lessons from these stories. My life has not been so dramatic as my grandparents', but I still think I absorbed their lessons. I learnt that life is not a rehearsal. There are real and immediate consequences to our actions or our inaction. I learned the importance of making the bold decision. If it wasn't for my grandfather's actions, I wouldn't be here, nor would my children, nor the hundreds of the other descendants of those 32 souls. He had a purpose, and he created a plan in the face of tremendous uncertainty. The only thing he knew for certain was that inaction would inevitably lead to demise. The same applies to business, to your career, to your life. Realize that everything around you will continuously change, and you have to adapt to the uncomfortable and unplanned situations. Like my grandmother, embrace change and create new opportunity. But the true lesson I want to draw for you today deals with this same question. How will you adapt to what the world throws at you in your lives and in your careers? When I was a young man, I took my first international assignment and was sent to Vienna, of all places, after the fall of the Soviet Union, with the goal of getting business in the 20 countries of the post-Soviet era. We won a large contract in the Ukraine, and it was worth tens of millions of dollars, and I felt absolutely invincible. I thought I'd already learned everything from my experience running business in Australia. I was confident that I could accomplish anything. All I had to do for this deal was to go to a dinner and a signing ceremony. So I get to this dinner, and out comes this bottle on the table. The minister is pouring glasses of vodka, which they drink like water. And so I had one. But I was on antibiotics at the time, fighting a bout of bronchitis. And growing up in Australia, Mum always said to me, don't mix alcohol and medication. So after the first kind of sizable glass, I said, I'm good, thanks. And the night goes on. The next morning, I wake up to a letter that's shoved under my hotel door. The deal's cancelled. What the hell just happened? So I go straight to the ministry, and I sat in the lobby for a week trying to get an appointment with the minister, but he wouldn't see me. I go home, tail between my legs. I called the minister every single day for the next 6 months, and he never took my call. One day he relents. He takes my call and he says, "You're very persistent." I said, "Sir, I understand I obviously did something wrong, and I'm not looking to reverse any decisions. I'm new in the region. I'm trying to understand what I did that caused the contract to be cancelled." He said, "You didn't drink with me. I couldn't trust you." This was my first realization of how important a deep understanding of culture is, and a key learning that I still apply today. The easiest way to fail is to take what works in one culture or in one situation and apply that same mentality to another. Doing business in the Ukraine revolves around relationships and social encounters. I had a lot to learn about understanding and adapting to different cultures. I needed to become more a student of diversity than of technology. In the scheme of things, the consequences of me not adapting in this situation were not severe. Lost revenue and profits for the company, and a black mark on my career. I was not in Hamburg trying to escape from Nazis. I wasn't in Shanghai trying to survive in the ghetto. We will all be tested in our own ways. I've since made 10 international moves, and the older I get, the more I realize the need to deeply embrace diversity and inclusion. To go beyond my own experiences, my own established ways, my own comfortable thinking and way of life. After all these years, I remain amazed that my grandparents could respond so expansively and adapt to what they faced in their lives. Now, a minute ago, you'll recall I said that life is not a rehearsal. There's but one exception. The time you spent at this university and the degree you now hold, this has been your rehearsal. Has it taught you everything? No, of course not. But it has provided you, perhaps for the first time, with an opportunity to make decisions, to be autonomous, and to adapt to a diverse world. A world that has challenged you, and a huge world of opportunities that await you. Here's what I think. Having graduated from Monash, you are more prepared to respond to what life throws at you than if you had not gone here. I'm certainly grateful for how Monash prepared me. When you walk out the door after this graduation ceremony, life changes. You walk into the world of those stories I just told you, and you begin to create your own. At times in your lives, you'll have to make decisions about whether to jump from the truck, about whether to leave the comforts of Vienna, about whether to learn from your mistakes. What will you decide? How will you adapt? How will you face the consequences? How will you push yourself out of your comfort zone? How will you leverage change to create opportunity? No matter what you achieve, always, always stay grounded and remember where you came from. Never be satisfied and always continue to raise the bar. As you succeed in life and in your career, give back, help, inspire, and teach the next generation. Monash graduates, you have my sincere congratulations and my warmest best wishes. I thank you for the privilege of speaking to you. I'm humbled by this honorary doctorate and honoured by your warm hospitality today. To my amazing wife Shelley, my parents, my daughters, and my entire family, thank you for being an incredible support system. I could not do anything without your boundless love and constant encouragement. And finally, to all of you, Ancora Imparo, thank you very much.